Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's call. At that time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, please disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn your meeting over to Ms. Wendy Peebles. You may begin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wendy Peebles. I'm the lead outreach coordinator at the Census Bureau's International Trade Management Division. And with me today, I have Bryce Bewley, Senior Export Compliance Specialist with the Bureau of Industry and Security. I'd like to start by thanking everyone for joining today's webinar. We have an informative webinar planned, and I would like to go over a few items before we get started. As the operator mentioned, the webinar is being recorded, and for confidentiality reasons, we ask that during the question and answer period that you only provide your first name and do not disclose your company's name or any other sensitive information. The question and answer period will occur at the end. A few days following the webinar, the transcript, record, and presentation will be posted to the Census website. Lastly, we value your feedback, so please complete the evaluation form at the end as it assists Census in planning future webinars. As you can see, evaluation is the first slide, and it will be placed back up at the end of the presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to give you a brief bio of our presenter today, Bryce Bewley. Ms. Bewley is a Senior Export Compliance Specialist working for the Export Management and Compliance Division within the Bureau of Industry and Security, Office of Exporter Services, and currently working out of the Office of Export Enforcement Field Office in Dallas, Texas. In that capacity, he teaches export compliance seminars throughout the United States and provides one-on-one personalized export compliance guidance to companies that desire to have their export compliance manuals reviewed for completeness. Prior to his assignment with the Bureau of Industry and Security, Mr. Bewley served as an officer in the United States Navy. He served 2 tours of duty in the Middle East, made 3 Western Pacific deployments, and served as Naval Security Group's Electronic Intelligence Officer in Rota, Spain. 5 years of teaching experience in the Michigan and Illinois public school system and has coached a Michigan High School State Championship golf team. Mr. Bewley received a master's degree in educational administration from Central Michigan University and a Bachelor of Arts in Education from the University of Michigan. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bryce Bewley, our presenter, for an hour.
Thank you much. It was, I had written that. I would think that that's somebody special. It's good to be here. I'm going to get into the first slide, and something happened, and I lost the first slide. I'm not sure that happened. Again. No, not what I wanted. I'm not sure why I'm going to a black screen.
Probably, are you at the end of the presentation? Okay.
Well, backwards through this thing. I mean, this. I was already at the end. I didn't know how that happened. But this slide, we value your feedback, and at the end, if you could or not mention what I made at the beginning, I'd appreciate it, but that's okay. I'm just joking. Started. Today, we're talking about creating an effective export compliance program and the BIS if a violation occurs within your company. The information about me, if you want to talk to me, if there's something we miss or you want to talk in further detail, there's my direct line after the presentation. I'll be glad to take calls. And let's go ahead and get into this. We look at compliance from a BIS perspective. We look at 8. The elements come from investigations that export enforcement has done. And over the years, what we find is these are the common elements that are missed once we do an investigation of the violation. I'm going to go through these rather quickly today. These are the elements, and as we go through them, I'll do a couple of within each of these. I can't an inordinate amount of time. We only have about 40 minutes or so to do this. So normally we teach, not normally, but often we teach this class in a full day, and we'll spend a lot of time on each of these elements. So as we go through this presentation, we'll be talking about, I'll do a couple of on each of these areas, and we'll continue to move on. Let's go ahead and get started. Making commitment. Talk about that. We'll move on to risk assessment, export authorization, record keeping requirements, audits, export violations, and corrective actions. When we management commitment, oftentimes the problem we find within companies is that people say, all right, we need to get to somebody to do a compliance program for us because government says we should have one. And they pick somebody to be their compliance officer, send that person to a course, and then that person gets all sorts of knowledge, goes back and tries to implement it, but management really hasn't bought into the system. They sent somebody to do it for show, and for a better phrase, and you try to, when the person at the bottom is trying to push that rock uphill, it doesn't work very well. So commitment needs to be top down. When that happens, all sorts of good things in terms of compliance can happen. So that's what we look for and we need within companies to have is a top-down process, not a bottom-up process. Bottom-up just doesn't work. The first thing we look at for in an export compliance plan or an export compliance plan, what we call an ECP. And just a quick pause here. If I use an acronym, I try often to repeat it at least twice. I'll repeat the whole acronym of what it means. ECP, I'm going to refer to that at different times. Export compliance plan is what it means. The first thing we look for is a management policy statement within that compliance plan. We look at a date that's recent. In this particular case, this is one that we made up within our own division just for some of the seminars that we use. This one has a date of August 15, 2013. We would look for something that had been newly done. People read it and actually recommend people sign it. And it gets that message out there that compliance is important. We recommend it be from the president, CEO, or highest person you can get within your organization to sign off on this. The plan ends up being just a statement of management's commitment to the export compliance plan. We actually have in the export compliance guidelines, we have some suggested for you to include in your writing. In this is a 50 or about a 50-page booklet with front and back cover included, and you can get it for free at that URL at the top of your page there. We have two sections. We have the guidelines, and we have in the back section something called an module. And let's go on to the next slide here. The sheet of this is what the table of contents for the guidelines are, the export compliance guidelines. And it's going to go through these elements that I'm going to go through today. It's going to give you more detail. It's going to give it to you in reading that you can look at and kind of ponder and read. The right side is the open of the audit module, and you have questions for each of these 8 elements that we talk about that you need to ask yourself within your company if you're creating your compliance plan or refreshing your compliance plan if you already have one. In the audit module, questions like, and I'm here just from the module itself, my commitment is strong and supportive, and you would check that off, or you yes, no, or we can strengthen it, something like that. These are just thoughts for you to incorporate, include, improve upon for each of these elements, and we have these level of questions for all of them. The management commitment statement is distributed to all employees and is easily accessible online or by print, and you would check a yes or a no, or we have it, but we don't in all those meetings, so we need to be better at doing that, so let's improve on that. So just food for thought and ideas. So that is a booklet that's available to you. I go back up at URL at the top of the page. You can get it. There's no charge. In fact, there's no charge for any of the services, Bureau of Industry and Security, for licensing or doing anything with you in terms of export. So the second area, risk. Risk is in 3 forms, almost always in 3 forms, and 3 forms usually only. It's either the item. The item I have, I will ship this item overseas. So I export it, and I find out later, hey, I did need a license. And it's going to be a problem with not understanding the classification of your own item. And I'll talk about classification in a little bit here. But classification, how it's classified, will see whether it needs a license or not. And you might have your item and it needs a license, but you don't think it does, and so ship it out. You find later that can become a risk if you don't understand your or how classification works. The second area is organizational operations. I understand my item. I understand it needs a license, but you put the wrong information on the shipping package and it went out license or without authorization from the Export Administration regulations, and of course with them. And so it can be an organizational issue that needs to be corrected within your company. The third area is customer or customers. Sometimes people, you have a good customer overseas, you see your item over there and it did everything correctly, but didn't realize that customer intended to resell it, or they changed their mind and sold it without telling you. So those kinds of things can happen, and those are the areas of risk. It's to understand exactly what your item is, the exported item, and the nuances of that as it relates to Export Administration regulations, and the organizational aspect, the administrative aspect of getting it where it needs to be, and then the customer or the customers on the receiving end of it. So those are your areas of risk. Some of the common problems that cause risk. A single person to export. That person leaves, goes on vacation, the company unexpectedly is ill, is for some period of time. The person oftentimes or around them will say, well, I've watched them do that. So I think I know what to do, but they don't have now the formal procedures. So not having a backup can be easy. So we recommend that you not have just one person in charge of all exporting, so that you run into that issue. You also have an issue of unknown end users or end users. You get the order in, it's end of the quarter. We see that a lot within export enforcement anyway, they tell me about it. I don't work for export enforcement. I work in their offices, but not for that organization. What to them, this comes in the end of the quarter with a big order. The company hasn't had their sales that they wanted for that quarter, and so make sure to get it. They sell, by the end user, no problem. They ship it, and they find out that person or that user or that use wasn't the correct use, and they didn't go far enough into risk with end user. Companies aren't aware of the diversion risks that their product might be associated with it. Oftentimes, where people buy things overseas, not the item itself, but for the chip that's inside of it, and they'll buy 1,000 units, and they'll take all the chips out, and they'll use them in something else that would not allow. And so you need to be aware of that. That can happen. That can be a red flag. We also have what we call anti-boycott laws. I can't speak to that a lot. We're not even allowed to talk about it too much because we're not the experts. There's a whole department of attorneys at BIS that work with anti-boycott. What I can say about it is a company in the states cannot participate in a boycott that's sanctioned by the state government. So you could the Arab League saying, we'll buy from you, but you use this bank, and this bank, this group to ship it, or for freight forwarders, because they're associated with Israel. It happens to you. We have a department that works on those issues, and you can call and talk to them about anti-boycott laws. You can't participate in that is sanctioned, as I said, by the United States government. Another area that is common and has common problems is what we call companies need to develop what we call the hold and release procedures. And a lot of times people within a company, we find out they don't know who has the authority to put a shipment, who has the authority to put it on hold, and who has the authority once all the issues that could be stopped and held has the authority to release those. And one of the things we recommended as you're putting together an export compliance plan is think in advance. Who has the authority to stop, hold, and conduct risk procedures for your items? There's various ways to mitigate risk. You can screen parties, end use statements, and proven freight forwarders. You got the people that are doing facilitation for your exports, freight forwarders, whoever they are. Audit, ask them and ask them to audit. Can I audit my shipments through your company? If you're shipping your own warehouses, then you can certainly audit your own warehouses, and we talked about that. I'll talk about that in a few slides later. Exportation. First thing you need to determine for shipping any item out of the United States, and the jurisdiction is almost always going to come down to three departments. One, Department of State, or Treasury. State for items that is usually related to missile systems or guidance systems or military systems, I should say, in a broader context, not just missile systems, but missile systems would be as part of it. Military, think of it that way. Then commerce would be virtually everything else, except for those areas that Treasury controls that are for embargoed countries. So, first thing, so from this point on, we're going to assume, every talk about, the assumption is going to be that it's under the jurisdiction of the Industry and Security, Department of Commerce. So, classification. When you're with the Department of Commerce, and the first thing you must determine is something called an export control number. We call it an ECCN, another acronym, ECCN. That ECCN, Export Classification Number, is something that for me is easiest remembered if I backwards. It's a number that classifies and controls the export. There's a lot of controls associated with products out of the United States. It's just a numbering system we've developed that classifies that item and controls export. And by control, I'm talking about it controls it in the sense of, does it need a license or does it need a license? And so, classification and licensing. For authorization, you will either need a license once you determine your classification. Once you determine what that number is, that number will lead you through a series of steps, and it will help you determine whether or not you need a license or you don't. So, license, or you make that determination, the next thing you should do before you ship it out is screen. Screen for the party they're sending it to make sure they're authorized. We've had over the years people get an order, or they get a pre-order in effect. They'll say, look, we're going to order somebody from overseas. We'll say, we're going to order from you 1,000 of your items, but we're going to do it in a quarter. So can you get them ready? But when we order, we need them, you need to have you ready to do it, but we're not going to need it for months or 6 months. So can you go ahead and put in the license? So people in the license, it's a customer, they trust them, they put in the license, they make the parts, the license gets back, gets approved, and then turns around and they get the word from the company overseas and said, okay, it's been 6 months, I'm ready to, here's me, please send me the items. And they send them out. The problem is they don't re-screen the person. In that 6 months, that company, that group, that individual could made one of the denied parties, one of the entity lists, one of the companies or individuals that you send that to, and so you need, as that item is going out the door. I want to say about that point. Screening is critical action of the export authorization. Done as orders come in, we do actually recommend you do it when it comes in prior to export. Vendor programs out there, they're expensive, but they'll do the screening for you, for your end users and end users. The last item here on this slide is other agencies have produced a consolidated screening list. There's no charge for it. The screening list is really, vendors actually come to our screening list, get it. They put it in a different format, and that's their life. They look prettier and everything, but we actually have the screening tool, consolidated screening list tool that on our website. What was included on our screening list is, from the Department, we have a denied persons, entity list, and then verified State Department will have non-proliferation sanctioned list, debarred list. Treasury Office of Asset Foreign Controls will have the various designated nationals, foreign sanctions, leaders, and others that we will have on there. And that's all included on our screening list. So as you're screening with the consolidated screening list from the government or from the white, screening parties. And this is the way it looks, what the screening, screening tool looks like. You can just put in keywords or names, various things, and various names will come up, or companies will come up too. At the very bottom, that's where you can go look at the screening list on the website, export.gov. All of these areas are covered under Recordkeeping, under the Export Administration Regulations, Part 762, finding records. I'm not going through all of these today and talk about them, but the retention period, and well, it's generally 5 years, and that's what people tend to stick in their mind. You export something, and everything goes well, and then 4 years later, that person you exported does all the proper things and notifies BIS, and they re-export it. It years retention from the latest export. So if I just ship it to company ABC and they use it up in 5 years, and it's no longer there, and they don't re-export it, then 5 years. It's re-exported, then it's 5 years from the latest transaction. But this is covered in section, or in rather 762 of the Export Administration Regulations. We think it's important to create a system of records. Records. People often ask me, how much should I keep? And I tend to be conservative in that approach. And if I were in a position where I had thought somebody were coming in to investigate me, or a transaction of an export from export enforcement asked me the question, can you use this sale? That would be my goal. Above and beyond what records are, but if you want to know technically what you need to look at, you can look at Part 62.6 of the Export Administration Regulations, and it will tell you exactly what you need to keep. That's a minimum that you need to keep. The he's talking about is, to make that I never got in trouble, or the company I work for, I probably go beyond that. What they are. I just want to be able to try and recreate the entire sale from start to finish. That's pie in the sky, but that would be a good thing. As a minimum, you're going to need to do what is called for under Part 762 of the EAR. Section 762.5 talks about reducing original records. Do they need to be complete? They need to be complete, accurate, and legible. And they talk about the various storage methods. They don't need to be original, but they need to be, like it says here, complete, accurate, and legible. So there's a lot of information in Part 762 about maintaining that. And we think this is an important area, along with all the other areas of risk and training. All that have already thought through in your compliance plan, your EP. Record-keeping requirements and the sections of the regulations, Code of Federal Regulations, where you'll find them for State Department, Customs and Border Protection, Census, Treasury. So they're here listed for you. It's not BIS regulations. There are some other departments that you need to consider. We think training is obviously important. It needs to be job-specific training. Does the EO need to know all the details of everything that's going out of the company? Probably not. Somebody needs to be assigned those duties that knows all the details, that compliance officer. that we recommend that you at some point in your using those responsibilities to somebody. Very used to within the company to communicate your compliance message. You can do it through videos and intranet and internet, email. To get the information out about your program. Well, look, we're a company that we are going to comply with the United States Export Administration regulations, and we want you aware of that program. Even if you're not actually in the compliance part of it, we want everybody in the company to know, and we do that through a variety of ways. Incentive programs, voicemails, bulletin boards, companies, posters, and newsletters, a variety of ways you can communicate your compliance message within the company. There's a free resources, BIS Exporter Portal, BIS Online Training Room. We have seminars, that on our website that you can go look at and find out, hey, this one works for my date, and I'll go to that one over in Nashville. They're actually having one today. They're having one this week in Nashville. They have some other seminars coming up in a couple weeks out in the West Coast, and they have them on the East Coast, and we have them around the country. Census also has a compliance AES compliance training, and this Bureau has an export training room also. Auditing. One areas that we find that people can get in is, all right, we did all this work on our compliance program. Now we've got it, and it's working well, and everything's going good, and suddenly, boom, they have a problem. And one of the things we recommend is to build into your compliance program some kind of auditing mechanism. The sole purpose is to identify compliance deficiencies and to address potential areas of risk, to check for inconsistencies between procedures and practice. Now, I'll see and read a lot of compliance plans, and a lot of people are on the procedures and the policy, rather, and the procedures, but they don't match up. The practices that they do don't line up with what the procedures say they're going to do. We recommend that you think it through, consider that, and have your procedures and your practices lined up. We recommend that you do both scheduled and random spot checks of your compliance plan, so you find the problems as opposed to us finding them for you and coming in and having to, talk to you about it. Somebody at BIS, one of the enforcement officers. And it should probably be somebody qualified to conduct the audit with it, knows something about what they're looking at. The problem you need to be aware of here, though, is if I'm the compliance officer, is conflict of interest. If I'm in my team or all my own exports, and I just keep reporting, hey, everything's great, everything's great, everything's great. Now, it may be great, but you need to be aware that it exists potential for a conflict of interest when that happens. Now, it would happen, but it could happen, and you want to protect the company because that's ultimately what you're going to do. Is you're doing all of this so that you don't with fines and penalties. I'm talking a little bit more about that. So this portion is, what do you do when what's the handling export violations and taking corrective actions when you find a violation? You need to think it through in advance. Senior management needs to support actions when a violation comes up. You need to have an internal and external reporting process and already considered and thought through when you have a violation. And we're going to talk a little bit about voluntary self-disclosures here in just a minute. So, internal and external reporting process. And in this particular slide, the employee discovery at one end, at the other, on the bottom right, it says VSD. And in the middle of it, the first thing we recommend is once a violation is discovered, you cease the activities immediately. Do a company investigation, get outside counsel if needed, submit voluntary selection, submit a voluntary self-disclosure to export enforcement, and implement your corrective actions. It doesn't happen again. That space between that beginning and that end process is vitally important time frame. They need to through as quickly as you can to get the information over to enforcement, because it's when you submit a voluntary self-disclosure, it's a great weight in mitigating any fines or penalties that you might receive for that violation. But from then until that end, if you go too long, and OEE, which is always looking at data of exports, and so you need to go talk to this company. If they come in before you submitted that voluntary self-disclosure, it's no longer a voluntary self-disclosure. There is no great weight in the mitigation of that fine or that penalty. So it's important that you take it as quickly as possible. So I want to talk about the line of all of these voluntary self-disclosures. This is from 2016 and 2017. 2017, 420 disclosures. 2018, 475. It's down to the bottom line. 11% in 2017 and approximately 1% in 2016 received any penalty until it was, a fine or a penalty. So that's right at 99% are not going to get. All they're going to get, the majority, is a warning letter, and it's closed out. So there's benefit in submitting a voluntary self-disclosure. So that's my for suggesting you do a voluntary self-disclosure. I should say. Disclosures. Here's where you would mail them to at the very bottom here. Director Office, Export Enforcement, 1401 Constitution Avenue, Washington, D.C. A section that you're going to look under 764.5. Now, things here, and there's a lot of words on the next slide, but I want to focus on the words so much. I want to focus on the concept, and I'm going to try and use an example so it doesn't have to overwhelm you with the amount of words. I really want to highlight where you find the information so you can come back and look at it. And 4.5F talks about the treatment of unlawfully exported items after voluntary self-disclosure. You won't find this word carrot and stick anywhere in our regulations. This is something I've done because it's kind of for a better word from my perspective, a carrot and stick program. And what created is these two sections with lots of words in them. Let me explain what this is. These two paragraphs. I never thought my life would be brought down to two paragraphs in the regulations, but this is kind of where I live for much of my job, I should say. 4.2, acting with knowledge of a violation. It says no person may order, buy, sell, remove, steal, use, and it goes on to talk. What it really says is if you have a license or authority under the Export Administration regulations, you get that before you send it. And if you don't, you're in violation of the regulations. So license, you can't send it without a license. What happens when people do? Well, under 764.5F, the paragraph on the bottom, if you submit a voluntary self-disclosure, that criteria. You submit a voluntary self-disclosure. You kind of hit yourself with a stick. We will provide, in most cases, in almost all cases, a carrot of a type. And carrot is let me give you an example how these two paragraphs work, and that might be the easiest way to explain it. I send it I sell it, and I catch myself and I go, oh man, I sold this thing and I shouldn't have. I sent it and I shouldn't have. Got out of here and it shouldn't have. What can I do? Well, 64.5F, I can submit a voluntary self-disclosure, give them all the information. This is what happened. This is why it happened. This is where it happened. This is how it happened. All of that. When, why, where, how. All that information to the Office of Export Enforcement. And then request through the department that I work in, Export Management and Compliance Division, to our division for the end user to use it. Or say, I sent the wrong part and it without a license. I just want to bring it back to the United States. So if you send something, you can do anything with that item over there, and it's supposed to be used. If selling parts, so those parts need to be put somewhere in a storage area, a bonded warehouse, something, so that being used and put into that they were intended to go into without authorization from us. And 764.5F, we do that authorization once you submit a voluntary self-disclosure. So that's how those two paragraphs work together. Like I said, I call it carrot and stick program. That's a sanctioned phrase for it, but that's how I remember it. Maybe help you remember it too. The last item is creating, maintaining the EC, your export compliance plan. Really update your plan. Regulations are changing all the time, and you have ongoing education. So changes and people coming out into your system, education for the new changes, new people coming into your company, new old people leaving, going somewhere else, people retiring, people sick, you need to have replacements. Those changes need to be going on in education. This process of constantly doing changes to your program, you need to be aware that it needs to be done. If you change to a compliance plan in the last couple of years, you've missed an awful lot of changes in our regulations. One of the things we find is there's no sort of point of contact. We go to a company, well, who does that? Well, Smitty does that, or Barbara does that over here, and there's not a point. And a lot of people just don't have any idea of who they should be talking to. So it's kind of central point of contact within your company. When you do annual reviews of your compliance plan, you distribute it online and physical copies. You provide detailed instructions for everyday use. A lot of times, these in my past life in the military in particular, and we wrote them for show, and sometimes we wrote them for function. I think our goal is that you write a export compliance plan, and eventually you have to reproduce the thing because it wears out from use. We don't want to die in a because Val behind a dresser, or not a dresser, but a file cabinet, and found it 2 years later, and the dust bunnies have gotten onto it, and it's just rotted. We want it worn out from use. Make it useful when you create one of these. If you're going to put your time and effort into it, make it something functional for you at your particular company. And when you have one, it provides great weight mitigation for administrative penalties. Too much policy, not enough detail. Hey, we're going to do this with our compliance plan. We're never going to violate it. It's going to be great. Everybody's going to be wonderful, and we're going to be, wave the flag and all that. There's not enough details of how this thing who's going to be actually implementing this? Who can I contact if I've got a question? Go for more training. Look, I just hired here. I see something on a bulletin board about it, but who do I contact to get more information about it within the company? And people that create a great plan, and then they get down to and they don't do it. And by doing the audits, they sometimes miss their own violations that they could have caught themselves. And a lot of times, we find the contact information in the export compliance plan. BS, just a footnote, we will review your EP at no cost to you. We will do no charge if you have one, want to write one, or working on one. We'll do no cost. This is where you would send it. So Tom Androkonis, the Bureau of Industry and Security, Department of Commerce. Email thomas.androkonis@bis.doc.gov. And started, and I apologize again for starting at the end, but to give your feedback, hope this was helpful, and if there are questions, then we're going to be doing a few minutes to answer questions.
Thanks, Tom. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
At this time, if you'd like to ask a question, please unmute your line, press *1, record your first and last name when prompted. If you need to withdraw, you can press *2. Once again, in order to ask a question, you may press *1. Give us a few moments, please. It looks like we have a couple coming in. One moment, please. From Bonnie, your line is open.
Hi. Questions regarding Canadian shipments and how that will interact with the today, and high points being there's a lot of areas in which export regulations don't apply to Canadian shipments.
Well, actually, you're talking about Canadian U.S. shipments to Canada?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, export regulations apply to every country in the world, and that includes every shipment to Canada. With that said, we have fewer controls on more than we have licensing issues more licenses to anybody else. Most things can go there with no license required, and most things that do require a license are approved. Almost everything. It doesn't matter. Everything falls under the regulations of Canada. Whether it's in Canada or other country.
And then
the AR applies to it. So.
Okay, that's fair enough. And with that being said, the LBS shipments include commerce going to consumer that play a part within the export system.
Well, limited value shipments, LVS systems, or shipments rather, if you meet the requirements of license exception LVS, then you can use that. So the first thing you have to find out is my ECCN or find that. Do I have a license requirement? And if I have a license requirement, you would use LVS when a license is required for that item to go to a particular country, but license exception LVS, your item going to that particular country meets the requirements listed under LVS, and if you do, then you can just use that three-letter code. LVS becomes your license.
And if it's now, see, that's my question. We're going to say you need a license for these products that are low value. As soon as I know it needs a license, it goes, instead of an informal in my eyes, it's to a formal entry because it's going to require a PGA. A license for CITES or a license for, in this case, would be CFIA as opposed to FDA. So it automatically changes its perspective. If these are for nutraceuticals, for example, it would be a CFIA, even though it's going direct to consumer on e-commerce. Value shipment. Does that apply?
Low stands for low.
In my world, it does. Sorry.
In our world, it doesn't.
Okay.
In our world, it's limited value shipment.
Okay.
It just means they will tell you how much the value is of a certain item that you can ship to a certain country. When you go read it, it will tell you what that regulations under the EAR. It will tell you what the limits are of that value of that shipment going out. And I can't speak to if this is. Did you say this was pharmaceutical?
Nutraceuticals. Nutraceuticals are like your power bars, your protein shakes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Most of those, I speak to them. I'd have to talk to a licensing officer, but I can also. Most of those are going to be no license required to most places in the world. There will be some exceptions. You can Iran, Syria, but generally protein bars, those kinds of things, they're going to require a license most places. You're going to ship most of that, and they are no required.
Okay. And then my last question here is on the single window initiative.
With single window, where is that from? Where did you hear about single window?
From U.S. Customs.
Yeah, I speak to customs regulations. I can only speak to the export administration regulations. They're two different.
Right, and I just didn't know how it would tie in. That's all.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm not able to tell you. I recommend you get a hold of customs and talk to them.
You get in touch with BIS. Because we export a lot to Canada, so that's my question. Okay, and so now I'm getting, that's what I was. Oh.
Yeah, if it's under their regulations, I can't speak to their regulations. I'm not authorized. I don't have the knowledge on it. Their regulations. It's taken me 15 years to kind of get a fairly good handle around our 2,000 pages.
Yeah, I hear you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Next, we have Abraham. Your line is open.
Abraham.
Great.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good.
Also, a quick question. I know you mentioned a little bit at the beginning of the presentation when the ECCN is determined, you might be subject to a license. So what goes from there if the ECCN demands a license?
That's really about a 2-day class that I didn't cover here. What you have to do is do you know your ECCN?
I might recall it know if it requires a license or not. It's we're
No, but
late.
do you know what your number is? Have you looked it up?
E001, I think.
2001. So the B tells me it's some kind. You're probably production equipment, maybe, or is it?
Yes, that's correct.
So it's what you do is look in the regulations under the 2B001, and it's going to tell you what your controls are associated with that. That's probably a better question. If you just call me afterwards, maybe we could walk through this. And I'll give you a second number if you have even more questions. Let me give you another number that's what they do, is they just answer questions on this all day. 202 42 411.
Got it.
And that's a longer question than what we have time for here. So if you call me, or you can call them and they answer that all day. Like I said, we can get you that answer, or we can walk you through some more steps that you.
Appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, my question was basically, our trade department determined that there is a license required.
Okay.
And yeah, I was wondering what the next step would be.
Once you recognize that there is a license requirement, they're going to do something that I haven't discussed here. It's called putting in an app, SNAP-R, SAP-R, Network Application Program Revised. The R is for revised. You're going to put in an application and put in for a license. You're going to tell, it's going to have drop-down windows. You're going to get when you submit your request online, in the SNAP-R account, you're going to end up get company identification number and a personal identification number. One for the company, one for you as the individual putting the information in. You'll set it electronically online, and you'll submit your license, and you'll attach your documents to that system, and it'll be assigned to a licensing officer, and you'll get it that way. SNAP-R system.
Got it.
Next we have Kathy on the line. You're live, and Kathy.
Hi, Hugh. Thanks, Bryce. Hi, it's been helpful. The one question that I have is, what have you seen in compliance programs that help to control the flow of export-controlled technical data? That's not an easy thing to master.
Is this technical data online? Is something that people have access to?
Yeah, our concern is, we have a shared network. I'm in a global organization, and try to have everything very carefully, access points and where's the server stored and all this kind of stuff. But we have a lot of, I never quite feel fully in control of information because it could go out via an email, just by some, just a body. I mean, it's not like, It's not as easy to control as an item. We have, starting point is my sales entry, and my last call is the shipping department, and everybody knows their role. But
let me ask you: is it technology that you sell? I mean, is it the software, or is it firmware?
No. It's really. I work for a manufacturing company, so yes, it could be blueprints, could be production data. Just how.
Well, that's something I'd have to give some more thought to. And you have my number, right?
I do.
All right. I'm going to have to think a piece on that, a bit on that. Why don't we, let's gather offline and let me answer that and think about that and brainstorm with you a little bit on that. I can't get you the answers you want. I can put you in touch with the encryption licensing department and see what they say. They would approach that, okay?
Okay, great. I'll call you.
And I'll be on here for some period of time. I don't know how long, but you're welcome to call me.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Yep.
And it's Nina. Your line is open.
Yes, my name is Nina. I'd like to thank you for bringing it to everybody's attention that more than one person needs to be responsible for exporting. We're a small company. We are fortunately, feel spoiled after listening. We're an EAR 99 export. Yeah. Oh, good for us. We're automotive aftermarket, high performance. We just make cars go really fast. We make turbochargers.
Where are you located out of?
Oh, we're in Indiana.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, most of our stuff is made in America. We're a manufacturer, and we do some castings and things, but most of our, and everything has to be modified because everything's gone through, balanced, and because of racing. But
sure.
I think it's very important for everybody to know that you can't just have one person that handles everything and knows everything. And we were recently acquired by an international corporation, and now they're starting to talk about work instructions, and I'm like, oh, thank you. And they're going to learn, because they keep saying, what are you going to do if I get dead? Way home. What are you guys going to do? So this is very important. I don't think people realize how important that is, even though we are small. We export all over the world. I'm sitting here exporting to Puerto Rico while I'm listening. I got one going out DHL today. It's not big, but to my customer.
And this is required to them because it's not they're the state.
No. Yeah, there's well, you have to AES it if it's over.
Right.
But
export licensing, yeah.
Now the kinds of things that we do are just so specific. You can't really, and I've phoned many times, and all of the Census Bureau and the AES and the turf code people, short-staffed as they are, I think they're very wonderful, very helpful. I've been on the phones with them for the last 10 years asking questions.
Okay.
Very helpful. So I guess my main thing is thank you. And thank you to the webinar. I print screened every page and go to my compliance department going, look what I got.
Deal.
Help me.
Well, that was helpful. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You
Bye.
I have a few more questions. The next comes from Megan. Your line is open.
Hi, Megan.
The soft technology export, especially electronic transfers. I was hoping that you would have some general advice on the documentation of that for your compliance program, particularly interested in report, for example, reported under license to a customer or a vendor. What
the things that, yeah, one of the things that most people don't realize, and I didn't mention it earlier, is in effect, when it's not only do you have requirements on your end when you ship it out, export it, but the person on the other, or the group or individual company on the other end, that requirement, that those regulations of the year go with that for the life of that product, whether it's technology or so. When you're talking about re-exports, the re-exporter, if you know they're going to re-export it, then you can have an idea of where they're going to send it. You can, and if you know that before they ever order it. If they buy it from you and then you find out later after they've had it that, hey, I think I'm going to re-export this, just you can let them know, hey, you apply with the U.S. export regulations, whether it's, they think it's their property, it's in their country, and it'd be an awful hard thing to do, but they still required, they're required to, yep, no. I would inform them by email. I would make copies of that email, keep it in your file, so if it becomes a problem, it doesn't back on you.
That is actually what I was asking is, what documentation do I need to have on file to make sure that if they don't comply, that it doesn't fall on me?
Well, I would do something in an email probably. An email, you know, it has a date time stamp on it. It has its from to line, a subject line. It has the information. That's gonna be the what you're gonna need. If you want to go further and say, called you on this date and left my number, I haven't received it. I put all that in an email. I would just that would be your documentation. If people want to do things with the stuff that we send them, we can't stop people from doing bad things. So, what you can do is just do the best you can at your end to make sure that you've done all you can to protect yourself. That's really it. That's what I would recommend. And show that you made
I attempt to educate all of my suppliers.
Right.
The number of discussions I've had with them explaining U.S. export regulations to foreign suppliers have been very fun.
A great point that you make, because that's one of the things I did mention today in training. Bring your freight forwarders in, bring your suppliers in, and part of your training on compliance, so they have a sense of what you're looking at and what's important to you. They're working with them. Great point.
One of the big things that I have encountered, especially since I work with mainly 600 series and 515 series items, is deemed export controls within the United States, especially with suppliers within the United States. They don't know about them. There's so many U.S. companies that don't deal with international exports. They don't realize that having an employee that's here on a visa and giving access to technical information is an export.
Yep. Point two, and I didn't cover deemed export today either. This was mostly on compliance.
Exactly, but a big part of my compliance is making sure that my engineers know, even when they're talking to the United States, even if it's under an NDA, we need to take into account export control.
Yep, and I'm making a note to myself that when I do a webinar, I'll include some information on deemed export compliance. So very much, yes. Deemed exports are a very interesting issue, and well, I'm not sure how many people that are listening understand what deemed exports are. Basically, somebody from a foreign company comes to your country, comes to your company to look at what you're doing.
United States on visa.
But
working for a supplier.
Right. If they have a green card, then it's not a deemed export. But if they're just here on a visa, they can't. What technology they see you utilizing, they need to have that knowledge in their head when they go back to their country and converse engineer it and all that kind of thing. So, we don't want them to circumvent the regulations by taking that knowledge back with them without prior approval. So you can gain export license for people to come in to the and get information. So there's export licenses too. So
the license exceptions like TA can be utilized for following.
Right. Yeah.
Just a matter of getting the right documentation in place and knowing that it exists.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And best wishes.
We probably have time for maybe one or two more questions as we need to wrap up. Thank you.
Okay. Our last question comes from Rebecca. Your line is open.
Hi.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi. Thank you again. I agree with everyone. This has been very insightful. My question is, when filing, is this same thing as filing an ITN for export? This client?
No, ITNs are going to be, you're going to be working with ATS systems, AES systems. Yeah, I mean, ITNs, we only work with them when we're reviewing what people are you know, I have to go in through the ATS system myself to look at, we do work on investigations, but within BIS, that's not within our area of what we work with. Then to do, look at data, what's going, and sometimes we'll look, and when we look at the data that we have access to, we end up saying, hey, somebody has a license, but they shipped it out with license required, and we're wondering, well, we see a pattern of this, we'll talk to the company, call them up and talk. But other than that, we don't even work with that system.
Oh, so do you, could you direct me who could get further answers to the questions that I was going to ask?
Are all census or AS questions, or rather?
It is to do with filings, yes.
Filed AES.
Filings, I can assist there, Bryce. You can.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay. Yes, you can contact our International Trade Helpline at 800-549-0595 and listen for the various options. If you need assistance with AES filings or classifications, just select the right option and an analyst will be able to assist you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? And we have time to do any more, I guess. So if we're going to do any more and people want to call me directly at that number, the 202 number, I'll answer as many as I can and direct you as best as I can.
Are you there? Any other questions, or that ends?
There are questions.
Great. Well, we certainly thank you for your participation today, and certainly want to thank our presenter, Mr. Brock from BIS. And please visit our website for future outreach events for webinars coming up in late spring and early summer. Once again, thank you, and please complete the evaluation. The webinar.
Thank you for joining today's conference. All lines may disconnect at this time. Speakers, please stand by for your post-conference.